On the listening and speaking, my page is about promoting oral language. So I broke it up into two parts, and that's the listening and the speaking. So with the listening, we'll talk about TPR, which is total physical response. We'll talk about listening comprehension tasks and listening centers. With the speaking, there's oral retellings, songs and chants, oral representation, and minimal pairs. So, with the listening, the total physical response is one of the most popular strategies in language learning classrooms in the world, not just in the United States. And this is whenever you give some commands to students and then their response is to act that. So, for example, um, you tell them, put your head down, and then they put their head down. And once the students get more advanced in the TPR, then they switch the role. So they get to become the one to give the commands and have others reenact it. So at the bottom, after I talked about the listening and speaking, I have a section where it says activities that promote oral language. And underneath that, I have action routines, which is activities that you can do in the classroom that is part of the TPR. So under there, I have head, shoulders, knees, and toes, and Simon Says, which are fun games for students to do. I got this off of a website that comes from a journal or from an article that talks all about oral language and all these activities that you can do in the classroom. And the next thing with the listening is listening comprehension. This is when you give students a source of spoken language and then they complete a task that demonstrates their comprehension, which there are many different ways they can practice it. They can watch videos, they can watch podcasts, they can do listening labs. Like some of the videos that they can watch are like TED Talks, and the listening labs are like kind of interactive where they listen and then answer questions about what they just listened to. And so another thing that has to do with listening is listening centers, which I have seen this in a lot of classrooms, and this is where the students go and they listen to a book, and while they're listening to the book, they have the hard copy in their lap also, and so they're following along. So this helps them put two and two together because they might not be able to read it themselves, and so they hear people reading it, and then the more they hear the audio of the book, the more they can understand and then probably read the book on their own. And I've read that this is not just good for in the classroom, but if you get like take home kits and take it home, it's good for the students because if they're English language learners, that means that their parents probably don't know much English either, so they can't really read them books in English. So this could be a learning opportunity for the student and the parent. And so then I have a picture underneath it, and it just shows two students listening and has the hard copy in their hands. And so then when we go to the speaking part, this is where we get to the fun stuff. I think the speaking part is the most fun about the oral language. And the couple things that I have is the oral retellings. This is where something a student explains something they've heard or read in their own words. And so then it allows the teachers to make quick assessments of the ELL's comprehension. So it helps them know if the student understands what they have read or what they have heard because they explained it in their own words. The next thing is songs and chants, which pretty much speaks for itself. It's where you make the stuff that they are learning into a rhyme, like add a rhyme and a tune, and they can sing it or they can chant it. This makes the classroom more fun altogether. It helps and you can do it in any grade level. Um, it is important that the music be at a moderate pace and the lyrics be clear and audible because this is a learning experience. And I know some songs, the music can be louder than the words, or the words can be so fast you can't understand it. And so it's important that the students can understand it. And another one is oral representation, which is what it sounds like. It's like a traditional show and tell. The student brings something in, they tell the class about it, and then they get to answer questions about it. Which in the classroom, this is good for both sides. This is good for the students because they are motivated. They really want to tell you what they brought it for a reason. And then for the students watching, they want to ask questions. They're motivated to ask questions because they're interested in what the student brought. And the last thing is minimal pairs. This is where the the speaking can get confusing because we do have a lot of words that sound the same, such as bit and hit, boy and toy, pen and pan. And so this is where we practice those and help the students understand the differences between them. So when listening and speaking English, they understand it better. And so after that, I have a picture of the Little Mermaid book. And I kind of related it to my IEP connections because I got to see oral retellings firsthand in my ELL classroom that I was in. I was only in there for a couple hours, and what they did was there wasn't many students in the classroom. This was at USI. They split into two groups, and one got a story that was more like a traditional story, and the second one got like a fairy tale story. So the one that I got to see them represent was the Little Mermaid. And that's where they read the story. They went over who would be what character. They gave each other lines. They had to memorize the lines. They weren't allowed to have a piece of paper with them. And so then somebody was at the board and they had like a PowerPoint up that kind of reminded them what scene was next. And they reenacted it for us. And it was really fun for all of them and for us watching because it was funny. It was funny watching them replay The Little Mermaid. So this helped with their listening because they might have listened to a story, they might have watched the movie. This helped with their reading of English because they had to read the story, they had to memorize their lines, and this helped with their speaking because they had to play it out. And so I thought that was an amazing opportunity for me to understand what those students go through and what helps them firsthand. And then underneath that, I have activities that can promote oral language, which I talked about before. And so I talked about the action routines, and another thing is board games. That helps with both listening and speaking comprehension because you have to listen to what other people say, you have to know when it's your turn, and if it's a board game with a card, you have to know how to read it out loud. And it's fun. Another thing is comic strips, which is another oral representation. They could create their own comic strips and then share it with the classroom. So they're not reading a story that's already been made, they're making their own story and then telling it. So that could be even more enjoyable for them because they get to tell their own story, and the students watching really want to know about the story you're telling, so they might ask questions. And I got all of those from our website, like I said, an article, and it had many, many more activities they can do. This is probably a website that I will keep because I know that I'll need these activities in my classroom for my English language learners. And so at the very bottom, you'll see a YouTube video. And this lady just sits there and talks about the importance of oral language in the classroom. And she has the best points, and it was so informational for me, and I hope you guys like it too. So yeah, that's my page on oral language, and I hope this helps you better understand what the English language students go through and how we can help them in our own classrooms.